Sit with this story gently, not to judge, not to sensationalize, but to understand. This is not a story meant to shock you. It is a story meant to explain something many people never learn: how harm can begin in places that look safe. She was just a girl, not a headline, not a statistic, just a girl living an ordinary life. Her world was small, predictable, and familiar, a home where people knew her name, faces she had grown up seeing, voices she trusted without question. She believed in safety the way children are taught to believe in gravity, as something constant, unquestionable, always there. She was told, family protects you, familiar faces keep you safe, danger comes from outside. So she learned early not to be afraid, and that lesson stayed with her. She learned how to smile politely, how to listen when elders spoke, how to stay quiet when something felt confusing, because quiet was praised as obedience, and obedience was praised as goodness. No one ever told her that silence can also become a cage. Her days passed like everyone else's: school, home, laughter that came easily, dreams that had not yet learned fear. She did not know that a life can be divided into before and after without warning. She did not know that trust can be used against you without you doing anything wrong. There was someone in her life everyone considered safe, someone ordinary, someone familiar, someone who belonged. That word, belonged, is important, because when someone belongs, you don't question them, you don't watch closely, you don't imagine harm. And she didn't either. Her body had not yet learned alarm. Her mind had not learned suspicion. She did not know how to name discomfort. She only knew how to feel it. And when discomfort came, she did what she had been taught to do. She stayed quiet. Not because she agreed, not because she understood, but because confusion freezes before it speaks. Many people think harm begins with force, but often it begins with confusion, with moments that feel wrong but unnamed, with instincts that have never been trained to defend themselves. She didn't scream, not because she didn't want to, but because her body didn't know how. She didn't run, not because she didn't fear, but because fear sometimes locks you in place. Her silence was not consent, it was shock. Time did something strange in those moments. It slowed. Sounds felt distant. Her body felt heavy, like it no longer belonged to her. She learned something that day, not about the world, but about herself. She learned that trust can shatter without noise. She learned that safety can disappear without warning. She learned that pain does not always announce itself loudly. And then, life continued. People talked. The house breathed as it always had. Meals were cooked. Laughter returned to rooms. But something inside her had gone quiet. Children often don't have language for trauma. They don't say, "I am harmed." They say nothing, and adults mistake that silence for being fine. She began carrying a secret she did not choose, a weight she did not understand, a memory she could not explain. She wondered if it was her fault, because children always do. She replayed moments, searching for mistakes. Did I misunderstand? Did I imagine? Did I do something wrong? No one told her that harm does not require permission. No one told her that confusion does not equal guilt. So she learned another lesson, one far more dangerous. She learned to doubt herself. From the outside, she looked the same, but inside, something fundamentally had changed. Her body no longer felt like a safe place. Her mind no longer felt like a refuge. Her trust, once effortless, now felt risky. And yet, she said nothing, because speaking felt impossible, because she feared being blamed, because she feared breaking something bigger than herself. Silence became survival. This is how many stories begin, not with violence, but with quiet, not with screams, but with unanswered questions. And this is only the beginning, because what happens after often lasts far longer than the moment itself. Silence did not end the moment. Silence followed her. It followed her into the next day, into the next week, into the way she looked at mirrors and the way she avoided them. Nothing on the outside had changed, but inside, everything felt unfamiliar. She woke up every morning with a strange heaviness in her chest. Not pain exactly, more like pressure, like something unsaid sitting where breath should be. She tried to return to normal, because that is what the world expects. She laughed when others laughed. She answered when spoken to. She did her best to become invisible to her own confusion. But trauma does not disappear because it is ignored. It settles. It waits. It reshapes. Her mind kept asking questions it could not answer. Why didn't I stop it? Why didn't I say something? Why didn't my body listen to me? She didn't know yet that these questions are common, that survivors almost always interrogate themselves before they ever question the person who caused harm. She thought strength meant silence, because silence had kept things normal, and normal felt safer than chaos. So she stayed quiet. But silence has a cost. Her sleep began to change. Some nights she couldn't sleep at all. Other nights she slept too much, as if rest could erase memory. Her body reacted before her mind understood. Sudden noises startled her. Certain places made her uncomfortable. Certain voices made her tense. She didn't know why. She just knew she felt unsafe in moments that used to feel ordinary. This is how trauma works. It lives in the nervous system long before it finds words. She began to withdraw, not dramatically, but subtly. She spoke less, trusted less, observed more. She became careful. Careful with smiles, careful with touch, careful with herself. People called her mature for her age. They didn't realize that what they were seeing was not maturity, but vigilance. She was always watching, always calculating, always preparing for something she could not name. At times she wondered if she had imagined everything, because nothing looked broken. And when nothing looks broken, you start to believe that you are the problem. This is where shame begins. Not because someone tells you to be ashamed, but because you cannot explain your pain without fearing blame. She imagined telling someone, just once, just to see what it would feel like. But her mind played the responses before her mouth could open. What if they don't believe me? What if they say I misunderstood? What if they say I'm exaggerating? What if they ask why I didn't speak sooner? Those questions felt heavier than silence. So she carried everything alone.
And slowly she began to change the story in her head. Maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe I'm too sensitive. Maybe I'm making a big deal out of nothing. This self-doubt became a second wound. Because when you stop trusting your own perception, you lose your sense of reality. She learned to disconnect from her body, from her emotions, from the part of herself that once felt alive. Disconnection can look like calm, but it is not peace. It is numbness. She stopped feeling joy the way she used to, not because happiness disappeared, but because she no longer felt safe enough to fully experience it. Joy requires openness, and openness felt dangerous. She learned to keep herself contained. She also learned to carry guilt that was never hers. Guilt for not preventing it. Guilt for not speaking up. Guilt for changing. No one told her that freezing is a biological response, that silence can be instinct, that survival does not always look brave. So she blamed herself. And the world, unknowingly, helped her do it. Because no one noticed, no one asked the right questions, no one slowed down enough to see the signs. This is how trauma becomes invisible. Not because it is small, but because it is hidden. Hidden behind good behavior, hidden behind politeness, hidden behind smiles that cost too much to maintain. Inside, she was exhausted, not from doing too much, but from holding too much. Every day felt like carrying a secret heavier than her body, a truth she had no language for, a pain she had never been taught to release. And yet, she survived. Not loudly, not heroically, but persistently. She kept going, and that too matters. Because survival does not always look strength. Sometimes it looks like endurance. Sometimes it looks like silence that keeps you alive until you are ready to speak. Long after the mind tried to move on, her body stayed behind. It remembered what her words never learned to say. Trauma does not only live in memory, it lives in muscles that tighten without warning, in breaths that shorten when nothing seems wrong, in a nervous system that never fully relaxes. She didn't know this yet. She only knew that something inside her was always alert. Her body reacted before thought could intervene. A sudden sound made her jump. A familiar smell caused her chest to tighten. Certain spaces felt unsafe without explanation. People told her she was overreacting. She told herself the same thing. But the body does not overreact. It remembers. She felt disconnected from herself at times, like she was watching life through glass, present but distant, here but not fully here. This distance was not weakness, it was protection. When the body senses danger it cannot escape, it learns other ways to survive. Sometimes it freezes, sometimes it numbs, sometimes it disconnects. None of these responses are choices, they are instincts. She often felt guilty for not feeling normal, for not responding the way others expected, for not being able to explain what was wrong. But trauma does not ask permission before changing you. Her body learned lessons her mind never agreed to. Lesson 1, always be alert. Lesson 2, trust is risky. Lesson 3, safety can disappear at any moment. These lessons shaped how she moved through the world. She walked carefully, spoke cautiously, watched faces for signs of threat. Even kindness made her uneasy, because kindness requires trust, and trust had become complicated. She began to confuse safety with control. If she controlled her environment, maybe nothing unexpected would happen. But control is exhausting. Her shoulders were always tense, her jaw clenched without her noticing, her breathing stayed shallow. This constant readiness took a toll. She felt tired even when she rested, overwhelmed even when nothing was happening, irritable without understanding why. Her body was working overtime, trying to protect her from a danger that had already passed. But the body does not understand time the way the mind does. To the nervous system, past threat can feel like present danger. She didn't know that healing would one day involve her body, not just her thoughts. She tried to think her way out of the pain, to rationalize it, to minimize it. But trauma does not respond to logic alone. It responds to safety, to consistency, to patience. There were moments when she felt nothing at all. No fear, no sadness, no joy. Just emptiness. People often misunderstand numbness. They think you don't care. In truth, numbness means you cared so deeply that your system shut down to survive. Feeling nothing felt safer than feeling too much. But numbness comes with loss. She missed moments of happiness because her body could not fully relax into them. She missed connections because closeness triggered alarm. She missed herself. And sometimes she wondered if she would ever feel whole again. What she didn't know yet was that her reactions were not signs of damage, they were signs of intelligence. Her body had adapted. It had learned to protect her when no one else did. That deserves recognition, not shame. But adaptation is not the same as healing, and one day, perhaps quietly, perhaps slowly, something began to shift. Not because the past disappeared, but because her body started to receive new information. Moments of safety, moments of calm, moments where nothing bad happened. These moments were small, easy to overlook, but to her nervous system they mattered. Healing does not arrive dramatically. It arrives in fragments, in breaths that deepen unexpectedly, in muscles that soften for a second longer than before, in the realization that danger is not everywhere. She was not healed yet, but she was learning something important. Her body was not broken. It was communicating. And one day, she would learn how to listen, with compassion instead of fear. Pause for 8 to 10 seconds. Soft ambient tone, slow inhale, slow exhale.
There is a moment after trauma when the danger is no longer happening, but the fear continues. Not fear of the event itself, but fear of being seen. Seen as damaged, seen as different, seen as someone whose story makes others uncomfortable. She carried this fear quietly. Because once you speak, you cannot take the words back. She worried that if people knew, they would no longer look at her the same way, that their eyes would change, that their tone would soften in a way that felt like pity, or harden in a way that felt like doubt. She didn't want to be that girl, the one people whisper about, the one people define by something that happened to her. So she hid. Not just the story, but parts of herself. She learned how to make herself smaller in conversations, how to redirect attention away from her feelings, how to listen instead of being heard. Being invisible felt safer than being misunderstood. She noticed how the world talked about people like her, how easily blame was assigned, how quickly questions turned accusatory. Why didn't she say something sooner? Why was she alone? Why didn't she stop it? Those questions echoed in her head long before anyone ever asked them. And so she stayed silent. Silence felt like control. If she didn't speak, no one could twist her story. But silence also kept her alone. She feared judgment from others, but she feared herself too. She worried that if she spoke the truth out loud, it would become real in a way she could no longer avoid. Speaking felt like reopening a wound that was barely begun to close. So she learned to carry two versions of herself, the one the world saw, functional, composed, fine, and the one she carried inside, tired, guarded, holding questions with no answers. This split was exhausting. She was always managing perception, always monitoring reactions, always anticipating rejection. Trust became conditional. She trusted people with small truths, never the whole story, because the whole story felt dangerous. She wondered if anyone would believe her without needing proof. She wondered if compassion existed without conditions. She wondered if being honest would cost her relationships, or worse, her sense of belonging. Belonging mattered more than truth when survival was the goal. So she smiled. She adapted. She learned how to exist without taking up space. But being unseen has consequences. Over time, she began to feel disconnected, not just from others, but from herself. When no one knows your truth, you begin to question whether it matters. When your pain is hidden long enough, it can start to feel invisible even to you. She sometimes felt like she was watching her life from the outside, participating but not fully present, existing but not grounded. She longed to be known, truly known, but feared the cost. This is the paradox many survivors live with: the need to be seen and the terror of being exposed. Healing requires witness, but safety requires protection. Finding the balance between the two is not simple. She was not weak for hesitating. She was careful. Careful because the world is not always kind to people who speak painful truths. Careful because once spoken, some stories are never handled gently. And yet, somewhere inside her, a quiet desire began to grow. A desire not to hide forever, not to explain everything, but to be understood by someone. That desire was fragile, easily silenced by fear, but it existed, and its existence mattered, because it meant that beneath the layers of protection, beneath the silence and self-control, there was still a part of her that believed connection was possible. Not yet, not now, but someday.
Shame is heavy, but not the kind you see on the outside. It is quiet, insidious. It seeps into thoughts, actions, and even dreams. She learned it slowly, through whispers she barely heard, through stares she thought were kind, through lessons the world taught her without ever saying a word directly. People around her had good intentions. They said nothing harsh. They offered smiles, advice, platitudes. But silence can teach as much as words, and society has ways of speaking without speaking. You should have known better.
"You should have been more careful. You should have told someone sooner." These statements may never have been spoken aloud, yet she internalized them. Because the world has a way of teaching survivors that they are at fault. And so she began to blame herself. Every detail of the event, real or imagined, she dissected, searching for a mistake, something to explain why it happened, something to justify the unfairness. Her mind became a courtroom, her heart the judge, her soul the jury. Every memory was questioned, every reaction scrutinized, every feeling weighed against some invisible standard. She forgot what it felt like to be innocent, because the world suggested that innocence must include vigilance, that safety is earned, not given, that trust requires constant verification. And the hardest part? She believed it. Self-blame is a quiet cage. It looks like responsibility on the outside, but inside, it holds your spirit hostage. She wondered if people would understand, if she could ever speak without fear of judgment, if kindness could exist without strings attached. Society often treats survivors as lessons, not people, warnings, not individuals. And she felt it. She felt that weight with every interaction. Every word, gesture, or suggestion carried the subtle message: you are responsible for protecting yourself. You are responsible for what happened. You are responsible for managing how others see you. It is exhausting to exist under that weight, to function while carrying blame that is not yours, to smile while carrying invisible chains. She began to measure herself constantly, her words, her tone, her presence. Every act of self-expression became a risk assessment. This hyper-awareness protected her, but it also isolated her, because true freedom requires presence, and she was always calculating, always guarding. Even moments of joy became complicated. She felt guilty for enjoying things, for laughing, for existing fully without fear. Guilt and shame often go hand in hand, but guilt can be managed. Shame is internalized. Shame is a story you tell yourself long before anyone else does. And society often reinforces it, unintentionally, through casual remarks, through myths, through fear and misunderstanding. She had to navigate that world carefully, not just because of past trauma, but because of how the world responded to people like her. Her silence became a strategy. Her compliance became armor. Her self-blame became a way to feel some control over something that was uncontrollable. But even in this darkness, something quietly resisted. A small, stubborn sense of self that whispered, "I am not only my pain. I am not only what happened to me. I still exist." That whisper was fragile, but it mattered, because the path forward begins with recognition. Recognition that the blame does not belong to the survivor. Recognition that shame is learned, not inherent. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, she began to notice it, the whisper of truth,
the knowledge that she could survive and perhaps even reclaim herself. Healing would not be immediate. Shame does not vanish overnight, but acknowledgement is the first step, and she was taking it.
She learned a skill early on, a skill not taught in schools, not in books, not in playgrounds. She learned to survive in plain sight. To the world, she smiled, she laughed, she participated, she appeared composed, she appeared normal. But inside, something had quietly collapsed. Not at once, not dramatically, not with screams. It was a slow erosion, like water wearing away stone, like wind hollowing out a tree. Her mind often felt heavy, her heart often felt hollow, her body often felt tense. But the mask never faltered, not in public, not at school, not at home, because she learned something crucial. The world does not always handle pain well, and exposure is dangerous. So she carried two realities, one visible, one invisible. The visible one was manageable, polite, acceptable, understandable. The invisible one was raw, chaotic, full of questions she dared not ask, full of feelings she dared not name. Sometimes she forgot which was which. Sometimes she caught herself laughing and felt a pang of disbelief. How could anyone see joy on this face when inside I am crumbling? Her silence had become second nature, her compliance armor, her outward appearance a carefully constructed performance. She observed others carefully. She mirrored expectations. She said what was safe to say. She hid what was unsafe. Even small gestures could feel risky. A frown, a pause, a raised eyebrow. Any of these could draw attention she was not ready for. And so she learned to self-regulate endlessly, to monitor every expression, every reaction, every movement. Her energy was spent on maintaining the illusion of normalcy. Her emotional energy diverted from healing, diverted from herself. Her friendships were tentative. She engaged socially, but never fully. She laughed at jokes, she contributed to conversations, but she held her deepest thoughts back. Even her own body felt foreign at times. The tension, the fear, the alertness, all lived beneath the surface, hidden by the mask she wore so diligently. People often complimented her on her composure, on her maturity, on her grace under pressure. They did not see the cost. They did not see the silent collapse behind the smile. They did not see the nights spent replaying events over and over in her mind. They did not see the internal exhaustion that followed her everywhere. This dual existence is heavy. To be fully present in one world while another world quietly collapses inside you takes resilience, takes strategy, takes constant vigilance. And yet, she survived. Even when hollow, she moved through the world. Even when exhausted, she smiled. Even when broken, she functioned. That is strength, not always visible, but profound. She learned to pace herself, to ration her emotions, to keep her truth contained until the moment was safe.
And she learned patience. Patience with others, patience with herself, patience with a world that often misunderstands survivors. Because survival is not a heroic act, it is a daily negotiation, a careful calibration of presence and absence, of openness and concealment. She understood instinctively. To reveal too much too soon could make her unsafe. To reveal too little could make her feel invisible. So she walked this delicate line every day, a balancing act between external expectation and internal reality. And though it was exhausting, though it was lonely, though it sometimes felt unbearable, she endured. Because survival demands endurance, because healing requires time, because one day she would learn how to reconcile these two worlds into one self that was strong, present, and whole.
Even when the world saw her smile, it did not see the parts of her that were hidden. The hidden self is not a secret in the usual sense. It is not something deliberately concealed. It is a survival mechanism, an invisible sanctuary that protects what the world might hurt. Inside her, thoughts moved quietly, memories lingered softly, pain coexisted with hope, and fear hid in corners where no one looked. She learned to compartmentalize, to place her emotions into invisible boxes, each one carefully labeled, each one hidden behind layers of outward composure. Happiness lived in one box, sadness in another, fear in another, anger, confusion, doubt, all carefully stored, away from prying eyes, because the outside world was unpredictable and vulnerability could be dangerous. Even small acts of self-expression became calculated. A laugh was measured, a sigh carefully hidden, a glance prolonged only when safe. Yet this hidden self was not inert. It pulsed beneath the surface, a quiet rhythm of survival, a whisper of what she truly felt, even when no one was listening. At times, it demanded attention, a sudden tear in the middle of the night, a pang of emotion at an unexpected memory, a flash of anger at an injustice she could not control. And each time she learned to manage it, to store it, to contain it, to survive until it was safe to release. This compartmentalization was exhausting. It required constant awareness, constant vigilance. Every interaction became a negotiation between her hidden world and the one the public could see. Friends believed they knew her, family believed they knew her. Teachers, colleagues, classmates, they all saw a version of her carefully curated, polished, safe. But the hidden self carried the truth, the depth of her experience, the moments that defined her survival, the emotions she could not voice. This duality, while protective, was isolating, because the hidden self could not reach out, it could not be comforted by others. It could only wait for the day when the world might understand. Yet, even in isolation, the hidden self was resilient. It remembered that she had survived. It remembered that she had endured. It whispered that one day, perhaps slowly, she could integrate these hidden parts with the person the world saw. Because survival alone is not enough. Healing requires recognition of all parts of self, the visible, the hidden, the fearful, the hopeful. Every compartment contains a piece of truth. Every layer carries a story of resilience. And so she continued, smiling outwardly, guarding inwardly, living in two worlds at once, one safe, one secret. And in that delicate balance, she discovered strength she had not realized she possessed.
strength not visible to anyone else, but profound all the same. Because resilience is not always loud. Sometimes it is the quiet persistence of a hidden self that refuses to break.
Healing begins quietly, not with fanfare, not with dramatic transformation, but with small, almost imperceptible shifts. She began noticing moments of safety, moments when her breath could deepen without fear, moments when her muscles relaxed for just a second longer than before, moments when she could allow herself a small smile without immediately questioning it. These were fragile moments, easily disturbed by noise, expectation, or sudden reminder of the past. But they existed, and their existence mattered. Slowly, she began to understand that survival had prepared her for this. The vigilance, the compartmentalization, the resilience, all of it could now be channeled toward healing. She started reclaiming her body, learning to notice its signals, listening to its needs instead of shutting them down. Gentle movements, breathing exercises, mindful presence. Each small act a declaration. I am allowed to exist in safety. She began reclaiming her voice, first in whispers to herself, then in conversations with people she trusted, then in stories shared carefully, intentionally. Every word spoken rebuilt a bridge between her hidden self and the world. She began reclaiming her mind, recognizing the self-blame that was not hers to carry, learning to separate responsibility from guilt, understanding that the past could not be undone, but the future could be shaped with patience, care, and courage. Trust returned slowly, not blindly, not immediately, but she learned there are people in the world who listen without judgment, who respond with compassion, and who honor boundaries. She also learned that joy is possible, real joy, not the kind measured against pain, but a genuine sense of presence and delight, laughing freely, creating, exploring, small victories that accumulate over time. Healing is non-linear. There are days of progress, there are days of relapse, there are days when the weight feels unbearable, and yet she persists. She learned that resilience does not require perfection, that healing does not demand a timeline, that strength can exist alongside vulnerability. And gradually she reclaimed her sense of self, not the self defined by trauma, not the self defined by fear, but a whole self, complex, tender, capable of love, trust, and growth. She began to integrate the hidden and visible selves, learning that both were necessary, both carried lessons, both held truth. The whisper of hope grew louder. The quiet desire to be known without fear transformed into confidence that connection was possible. Her heart began to carry weight with understanding rather than with shame. And in this space, she discovered something extraordinary, that even after deep pain, life is still full of possibility. Even after betrayal, trust can be rebuilt. Even after silence, voice can emerge. Even after darkness, light can return. She learned to honor herself, her boundaries, her needs, her story. Because healing is not about forgetting, it is about reclaiming what was hers all along, her voice, her body, her mind, her life. And though the journey is ongoing, she now walks with awareness, courage, and a quiet confidence, a confidence born not from the absence of pain, but from surviving it, learning from it, and choosing to live fully despite it.